We'll continue to watch those live pictures from the White House if we can. The President of the United States in that historic signing you saw right there at the table, signing that landmark bipartisan bill protecting same-sex and interracial marriages. The historic Respect for Marriage Act requires the federal government to recognize those marriages. And now you heard the president just moments ago saying this law is honoring and respecting love, marriage, and everyone's right to marry. Straight to our Terry Moran outside the Supreme Court, something you have been following for a long time, Terry, even more so after Roe versus Wade was overturned. And we heard those hints from Clarence Thomas that marriage equality could be the next in line, that it could be bad news for the LGBTQ community. Today, it's a new day.
It is a new day, Kira, no question, because since that case, the Obergefell case, which the Supreme Court established and discovered a right to marry the person you love, regardless of whether you're gay or straight, there have been millions and millions of people married. All these families across the United States, all of us know people who are married under the Supreme Court's recognition of a right to marry. If the Supreme Court ever takes that right away, as we now know they can after the overturning of Roe versus Wade, what this law does is protect those families and marriages. It requires the federal government and all of the states to legally recognize and honor marriages that were performed during the time that gay marriage would have been legal if the Supreme Court overturns it, and marriages that would be performed in states which would have laws that recognize gay marriage. It does not require all the states to have such laws in the event that gay marriage is overturned by the Supreme Court. But if you're married in one place, you'd be married everywhere. In other words, if you're married in California, every state would have to recognize the legality of that marriage. And finally, it does provide, this law, protections for religious groups that have moral objections to gay marriage. They would not be required under law to provide goods or services in those instances or their churches or places of worship, and they wouldn't lose tax-exempt status. But really what this does is protect all of those couples and all of those families in our country that are married and are our neighbors and people, our colleagues and all the rest, to protect them from the uncertainty and the chaos that would result if the Supreme Court ever overturns the gay marriage ruling and plunges them into legal limbo. Right now, because of this law that President Biden just signed, their marriages will remain intact, respected, honored, and legal no matter what.
Showing that no American should have to worry about losing the freedom to marry the person they love. Terry Moran there outside the Supreme Court. Thank you so much. Straight back to that event as we watch live pictures. Our Mary Bruce right there in the middle of it all. Mary, I even heard you say you have never seen an event quite like this. It is definitely a historic moment for those there. But it's interesting, the president singing a different tune from the 90s, back when he as a senator voted to block federal recognition of same-sex marriages. Why the change of heart?
Well, look, I think for Joe Biden, like so many politicians, this really has been an issue with a lot of evolution. But today is really a moment of all of that coming full circle for Joe Biden. This is about a lot more than just this one bill, this one law. This is about Joe Biden's legacy as well. You know, we were talking about how it was 10 years ago. I'm sure you remember well when Joe Biden did that television interview. He was then vice president, and he came out and made very public his support for marriage equality. He said at the time, as he did today, that marriage is a simple proposition. Who do you love? And he says that is just as true today as it was then. And it may be hard to imagine, but that was a very big deal at the time. And in going public with that, he nudged essentially the then president, Barack Obama, to come out, do an interview with our Robin Roberts, and make clear also his support for marriage equality. It really was a watershed moment in this country. So for Joe Biden today to be able to cement really his support for marriage equality into law is a very big deal indeed. And I have to tell you, he's doing it with quite a lot of excitement. I have never, as I said had seen a bill signing like this. This isn't normally how it is here out on the South Lawn of the White House. There are thousands of people here, advocates, survivors of hate-fueled violence. We are seeing many of the plaintiffs involved in these cases who are here as well. And it simply is a huge celebration of love, because in this bill, in now requiring all states to honor all marriages, it really does do away with so much fear that I think has been, that we have felt in this country, and it makes room for a lot of love, a lot of respect, and that is what is being celebrated here today. You can feel it. I think the president, yeah, he's still up there, I think, shaking hands. Knowing Joe Biden, he may be here quite a while, Kira, so the party goes on.
Yes, it does. And again, you know, you see the colors of the flag, the rainbow flag there behind you across the White House. I remember the days of Obama, Mary. That was the first time we saw the same lights across the White House when Obama told us all that gay marriage would be legalized. And it was such a historic day across the country and here while we covered the White House at that time. So, Mary, any idea who's going to get the pen? You know, after every bill signing, he hands the pen to someone. He's gonna have a lot of people fighting for that pen today.
That is a very good point. You know, often he signs like one letter with each letter with a different pen so that he can give them out. There's certainly a lot of people who would like to get their hands on that, but most people are just happy to be here, happy to experience this historic moment. And, you know, we should note that, yes, while this is a huge moment in our nation's history, there is still a lot more work to be done. There is still very much a concern about what a conservative court could do on this issue. So, yes, a moment to celebrate, but the work does continue. And I suspect maybe some folks up there shaking the president's hands are asking for one of those pens too, Kira.
And clearly the party will continue. Our Mary Bruce, Chief White House Correspondent. Mary, thank you so much. All right, let's take it now to Kimberly Whaley, a constitutional law expert. You know, Kimberly, the bill did pass with bipartisan support. However, we have pointed out it also has protections for religious liberty. So when you look at what happened today, symbolic measure, legally a big deal?
Honestly, I don't think legally it's such a big deal. It's more symbolic, and this is why. The way the law works is the Constitution's at the very top, right? And so the Supreme Court so far has said the Constitution protects the right to marry whoever you want. No state can limit that. With Dobbs, took that away for abortion rights. What this bill says is if the Supreme Court reverses that, and says in the future, states can stop allowing gay couples to marry. If you're already married, they can't take that away from you. So it's a little nuanced legally. Arguably, that was already protected by a part of the Constitution called the Full Faith and Credit Clause. What it does is reverse or repeal the Defense of Marriage Act. It's kind of amazing. 26 years ago, in 1996, the United States Congress did the exact opposite, and Bill Clinton signed it into law and said the federal government's not going to recognize gay marriage. The federal government, the Congress, is not going to require states to recognize each other's marriages. The Supreme Court struck down two important pieces of that, so that's kind of been repealed by the Supreme Court. So it's a little bit technical here. I do think it's extremely important to send a strong message to the Supreme Court and to the country that the other branches of government, the United States Congress, bipartisan, and the president is not on board with stripping people of their constitutional rights. And I would hope to see in my lifetime, frankly, a similar gesture for people who become pregnant and want to have reproductive choice stay with them and their families and their religious leaders and their doctors, and not have politicians dictate whether people have to have forced pregnancies. But symbolically, again, I agree this is really important, and it gives people the idea in their heads that there should be protections for these foundational sort of private decisions around how to live your life in marriage and in procreation, frankly, moving forward.
Kimberly, thank you. Great perspective, insight. Let's take it to the Hill. Our Jay O'Brien has been following this as well, getting reaction from there. You know, Democrats worked so hard to pass this legislation, Jay, before January. They feel they needed to get it done before the end of the year.
Yeah, it was a priority of Speaker Pelosi's to get it done, as you said, before the end of the year. You heard Speaker Pelosi talking about the history of this moment, both when the bill passed its last stop in the House before heading to the president's desk, but also today when she spoke at this event. You heard the president thank lawmakers who were so integral to getting this deal done. Tammy Baldwin, the senator from Wisconsin, the first openly gay U.S. senator, a Democrat, who got in a room with Susan Collins of Maine and lawmakers of both sides of the aisle and struck this deal to make sure that the legislation passed the Senate. And as you're seeing there, it got 12 Senate Republicans to vote for it. They needed 10. They got 12. Mitt Romney being one of the most notable people who said he would throw his support behind this bill before that vote came up in the Senate. You heard the president thank them for that. You're also seeing the White House try to set this bill signing in the larger arc of history for marriage equality. And you heard lawmakers talking about it as well as this bill kept coming up for a vote, that this is part of a decades-long fight for marriage equality, both for same-sex couples and for interracial couples. Just to underscore that, President Biden talked about the Loving versus Virginia case, the case in the Supreme Court, 1967, that gave the right to interracial marriage. One of those two cases, the other being Obergefell v. Hodges, that gave those key marriage equality rights that led to the creation of this law out of concern that those cases would be overturned. Again, Loving versus Virginia gets decided in 1967. That's 55 years ago. There are U.S. senators who voted for this legislation who are older than 55, who were alive when this case was decided. So there was a larger arc of history here, and the White House trying to set this key historic bill signing today as a seminal moment in that arc for marriage equality.
So with all that put into perspective, Kimberly, let me ask you, is it said and done, or can the court take another look at this?
Listen, in the Dobbs decision, the court established really a new two-part test for deciding if there are constitutional rights in the United States Constitution. Number one, is it in black and white? And there's nothing in the Constitution protecting the ability to choose who you want to marry, whatever color, whatever LGBTQ status. Marriage itself is not expressed in the Constitution. Step two under Dobbs is if it's not expressed in the Constitution, then you get in your time machine and you go back to the past. And in Dobbs, the court went back to common law England even before the Constitution was ratified. So we don't really know how far back Justices Alito and others would be comfortable going. But you get in your time machine, you go back and you say, was the right recognized way back then? And if it wasn't recognized back then, it's not recognized today. So that's why so many constitutional rights, not just abortion, are in a precarious position right now, because the court could apply that two-part test to all kinds of things, the ability to decide on your own health care, the ability to decide where your child goes to school, the ability to enter into a contract. In theory, a state could say only these people can enter into these kinds of contracts. All of this Constitution is really old and it's really vague, and so there have been rights that have been read into it that just are conform with our idea of liberty. Joe Biden talked about this idea of love and freedom, these democratic values, these American values. They're not in black and white. But if this conservative court is just going to go by the book, if it's not in black and white, then we go history, we go decades, centuries back. We're really going the other direction. So again, symbolically, to say to this Supreme Court, Justice Thomas in particular, the other two branches, including Republicans in the United States Congress, are not down for this reversal of constitutional rights in America. So you better be aware we're not on board with that. I think that's really, really important, because the Supreme Court is a little bit kind of sort of drunk with their own power, frankly, in this moment. They're being very, very aggressive in how they're rereading the Constitution. They're not elected. So bringing these issues back to the people, I think, is absolutely vital for the protections of our freedoms moving forward.
Well, I'll tell you what, you bring up old, vague, black and white. When you look at the White House today, you saw the rainbow colors across the White House, the most important house in the land right now. And that is going to be a big fight going up against old and vague. That's for sure. More to come, more to cover. Kim, Jay, thank you both so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.